To the excellent Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I go for refuge until the attainment of enlightenment. By the merits of generosity and others by me, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all beings never be separated from supreme happiness, which is without suffering. May all beings remain in boundless equanimity, free from both attachment to close ones and rejection of others. Rousing the heartfelt motivation of Bodhichitta, wisdom and compassion, the genuine wish that every single being has immediate happiness and it realizes their enlightened nature, experiences true lasting freedom. I'm Drakpa. This thought to offer a few reflections on Bodhichitta. And the kind of general topic is why Bodhichitta is the answer to every question. Why is Bodhichitta the answer to every question? And so I just literally kind of thought of this topic a few minutes ago and took like a literal minute to scribble down some kind of notes, and then just kind of sharing this with you now. Why Bodhichitta is the answer to every question within a Buddhist worldview or framework. So what is Bodhichitta? Bodhichitta, enlightened mind, or the heart mind of enlightenment, awakened mind. Bodhichitta, it's said to be the union of wisdom and compassion, the nature of every being. It's said to be the path, like every way that a Buddhist would practice a path towards immediate and long-lasting happiness and freedom for all beings is bodhicitta. Because just different ways to practice bodhicitta. The result is to be completely, fully natural as one is, as one already is, like to fully manifest one's natural potential and to remove whatever's blocking that from happening. And that potential is bodhicitta. And like the actualization of that is called Buddhahood, and that's just where everything's natural, which is to say that it's all ongoing, continuous bodhicitta, heart mind of enlightenment, the natural awareness all the time, uninterruptedly from moment to moment, regardless of what's happening, in all circumstances, and that would never turn off again. So bodhicitta, the heart mind of enlightenment, this is going to just zip through some pretty key, core, essential Buddhist concepts. So doctrine of scripture, and then also just practice points of the kind of realization or the application or the kind of engaged, living, embodied experience of those doctrinal kind of scriptural points or insights. So kind of together, if you're up for it, kind of build it from the ground up. So bodhicitta, how is bodhicitta the answer to every question? So Four Noble Truths. This is core, foundational, essential Buddhist doctrine. It's at the heart of every single Buddhist approach. Sutra Mahayana, Tantra Mahayana, Vajrayana, Dzogchen. It's the core of Theravada, it's the core of Zen, it's the core of Tibetan Buddhism, it's the core of all the highest, innermost, unexcelled Yoga Tantras. So this is Four Noble Truths. There's suffering, there's dissatisfaction, frustration, uncertainty, dis-ease. This is just a self-evident truth. It's a fact of conditioned mind. When my awareness looks externally or tries to hold on to something unrealistically in a way that doesn't match how that is, how experience is moving, is dynamic, when there's a mismatch or there's a gap, a separation between what is and what I wish it would be, that gap of unrealistic expectation or mistaken perception, confusion or ignorance, that gap is like the root of samsara, of cyclic suffering, this samsara. So this ongoing pervasive suffering or dissatisfaction, dis-ease, frustration. And then what's the cause? Second noble truth, it is that. It's that gap. It's that unrealistically holding onto a sense of me and mine, and then trying to orient with and around a moving dynamic world, of others and things happening. And I'm trying to hold it in an unrealistic way. So there's some kind of a fixation, a reification, a freeze framing of an actual moving, alive, dynamic system. And that freeze framing causes this gap, this unrealistic set of expectations that can never be fulfilled, and that's the cause of suffering. So a mind that does that is called duality consciousness, or dualistic fixation, and it's based on ignorance, not actually being with what is, but instead like believing in my mistaken perceptions, and then kind of dogmatically holding on to those mistaken perceptions and trying to fit the, round peg of reality into the square hole of my boxed framing. And it just doesn't work. So then the third noble truth, there is possibility of cessation of that suffering. There's a possibility of a complete removal or absence of any kind of suffering. And how do we do that? By removing the causes of suffering. And by removing those causes, that's called the path. And on the foundational Buddhism, it's called the Eightfold Noble Path. The 8 different ways that when we coordinate them as a life, as a worldview, as an approach, when we coordinate our body and our speech and our mind, what we do, how we are with our body, speech, and mind, according to these 10 virtuous ways of being in the world, and by avoiding the 10 non-virtuous ways of being in the world. That is to say, we have very natural, wholesome body, things we do with our body, how we communicate with our speech, and how our mind orients towards reality. Then when this wholesome, virtuous approach is taken, then this is kind of the key, one way to define the 10 virtues, or the Eightfold Noble Path. And so this is all Bodhichitta, the heart mind of enlightenment. It's talking about wisdom and compassion. So what is love in Buddhism? Love is actually wanting someone else to have happiness and then taking responsibility to help bring that about. Compassion is wanting someone else to be free of suffering and taking responsibility to have that come about, like to actually remove the suffering or the causes of suffering for others, to help facilitate that, to be supportive, kind, nutritious conditions for that to happen. And wisdom is really knowing how to do that. How do I bring happiness to oneself and others? How do I bring happiness to myself and others? How do I remove suffering from others and from oneself? Remove the causes of suffering? That's called cause, condition, and effect, or karma. And so when I actually see more clearly, more comprehensively, what are the causes, conditions, and effects that are causing the result of suffering to happen, and then I intentionally remove the causes and conditions for that suffering to happen, that's the path. And eventually there's no more causes for suffering, and then so there's no more suffering, and then everything becomes like a virtuous, completely wholesome, natural way of being in the world. That's called nibbana, or cessation, the extinction of suffering, based on extinguishing the causes of suffering. And so the wisdom knows exactly how interdependence is functioning, dependent arising, praticca samutpada, like how do things come together in a dynamic, kind of conditioned way so that they keep dynamically interfacing, or with interdependence, and to align with a moving system that is the flowing, reality of cause, condition, and effect. Eventually we can do that seamlessly, elegantly, comprehensively, without blocking it up, kind of, causing it to shut down in any kind of a way, without closing off to it. And that's freedom, a cessation, nibbana, the extinction of suffering. And so compassion is including more cause, condition, and effect, more beings, more heart minds of others. Every single being wants to be happy. No one wants to suffer. This is the ongoing universal experience of every single sentient being. We're all trying to be happy with every single moment, and to avoid suffering with every single moment. Every breath we take, every movement we make with our body, every thought we have. It's all, we have this wish to only experience happiness and to really not to avoid suffering. It's just the universal kind of patterning of every single sentient mind, of sentient dualistic consciousness. And it just gets it wrong with saying well, what's the cause of happiness? And usually it looks outside, or it unrealistically holds on to something outside or inside and tries to hold it in a dogmatic, reified, fixated way. And that's not wise, that's ignorant. And then it often over-exaggerates me and my sense of happiness and my wish to be free of suffering at the expense of all the other minds, the other beings that are also co-creating, co-participating in the world I'm a part of. So by having compassion to embrace more fully all beings, more beings, so start with myself, start with those around me that I care for, extend that circle of care and concern for more beings. So first with myself, friends, strangers, enemies or adversaries, those who I have like a very kind of tense relationship with, to put it mildly, by seeing that we're all in the same boat. We all want to be happy and free from suffering. And we all have these, that innate wish and these amazing natural talents and abilities to like actually have this goodness, this heart mind of enlightenment, or this bodhicitta, this Buddha nature, is the essence of our being. And so at the very least, even if we don't believe in Buddha nature yet, if we're coming from a more Theravada foundational Buddhist perspective and we just want to be free of suffering, everyone wants to do that. And like by helping you be free of suffering due to interdependence or dependent origination, that will cause you to produce less suffering in the world, including when you're around me. So it'll make me happy directly and indirectly. And then by removing my own causes of suffering, that of course immediately directly will relieve my sense of dissatisfaction and increase my sense of ongoing happiness. So it's win-win. With compassion, uplift you, uplift me, create a supportive, nutritious circumstance or environment, a world that we're like can more easily support our 10 virtuous, wholesome ways of being with our body and speech and mind. And the wisdom to know how to do that, and the compassion that includes more. It naturally is like orienting towards more inclusion of dependent arising or interdependence of cause, condition, and effect, or praticca so this wisdom and compassion, this union in a Sutra Mahayana view, is called Bodhichitta, the heart mind of enlightenment. In a Theravada, or a foundational approach, the foundational vehicle, or the yana system, both Sravaka yana and Pratyeka Buddha yana, then this is like usually called insight, or vipassana, and then that's based on like a ability to stay concentrated and stably calmly abiding, calmly staying. That's called anapana in Pali, or like samadhi, or like a dhyana, like a concentration. So we can stay wholesome, and then with insight or vipassana, recognize the nature of that staying, of that awareness. So we come to experience the four seals. Anicca, dukkha, anatta, nibbana. Like gradually we do that, and that's actually getting us closer to wisdom and compassion as being the uninterrupted experience of our lived reality. So we experience impermanence, suffering, no self, or no fixed self, and then nibbana, the cessation of all suffering, or nirodha, the exhaustion of all suffering. Those are the four seals, and that's all just talking about bodhicitta, about wisdom and compassion, about having insight into self and other, the nature of oneself as actually being more free-flowing, more dynamic, more like, temporarily aggregated. And then with metta, like loving kindness, we actually extend that to recognize all beings want the same. Like we're all aggregated beings, these like total host of like interdependent comings and goings, as relational matrices. And by having that ongoing insight and larger spheres of inclusion, like the Metta Sutta of self, other, extended others to include all beings, that naturally extends us into Sutra Mahayana, or what's called third yana vehicle. In more Tibetan Buddhist framing, the third yana or vehicle is Sutra Mahayana. That's where that begins in terms of the Mahayana approach. And so that's this greater vehicle, means it's a greater sphere of insight, a greater sphere of love, a greater sphere of compassion. It's including more interdependence. It's including a bigger view with more skills, with a bigger, faster result. That's why it's called greater. It's more comprehensive. It's more inclusive. It's not as if the lesser way is wrong or inappropriate. It's not a pejorative statement. It's just to say it's a little more confined, or a little more limited. It's still liberative, and like all these noble beings achieved, stream entry, once returner, non-returner, arhathood, like free of all the suffering, of personal suffering. Like they've been liberated. They destroyed, they're foe destroyers. They destroyed the ignorance, the attachment, and the anger or hatred that is the root three poison causes of that suffering. They've totally destroyed that, eliminated that, brought that to cessation. So they're totally free. It's a liberative path. Theravada foundational Buddhism of Sravaka yana, Pratyeka Buddhayana. But then in addition, Sutra Mahayana or Zen, this third yana, extends the focus, the skills, the path activities, the result. It extends that. It's greater. Mahayana, greater vehicle. So it just expands it and deepens it, that approach. And so in terms of bodhicitta, that's when it's like we start explicitly, the Buddha started teaching about bodhicitta, heart, mind of enlightenment. And here we have also always, like I'm trying to go over a little bit, the study side and the path side. The study side, which is scripture, the practice side, which is realization. Trying to include both, because there's always both. According to Nyingma school, there's always the way we map reality, and then the way we're actually are in the world in our lived experience. So there's an epistemology of how I orient towards with understanding knowledge, like how do I frame things. And then there's an ontology of being. How am I in the world? How am I in my body? How am I with others? What's the relational lived texture experience of that? And that's the realization of the practice side, the application side of the theory. So there's always this praxis, union of theory and practice. In Buddhism, that's called study and meditation. So here in Sutra Mahayana, it very explicitly talks about bodhicitta now, this third yana view. And here we're getting into the, philosophically speaking, on the study side, the middle way view, or Madhyamaka view. And Madhyamaka view is often subdivided into two types of Madhyamaka view. One is the more kind of immediate, is the lack of inherent existence. And then secondly, that deepens, widens, becomes an even greater view of going beyond all conceptual designation. These are the two essential aspects of the Madhyamaka middle way. First, we recognize that everything lacks an inherent existence. That's often talked about as if you look for it closely, you try to pinpoint any kind of an entity as if it's a singular, independent, permanently existing thing. That kind of an entity, singular, independent, and permanent, you will not discover that. Like you won't be able to find such a thing, and that's called a lack of inherent existence, a lack of true existence. By seeing that it's not singular, meaning things are composed of parts. It's not independent, because everything is dependently arisen. And it's not permanent, because impermanence, or anicca, is the nature of all conditioned things, of all conditioned relational kind of experiences of cause, condition, and effect. There's always these movement of multiple things or aggregates coming together that have parts. They're relationally constructed. They interact temporarily, independent upon one another, to produce results that are impermanent. So both the things coming together, the apparent things coming together, they're coming together, and the result of their coming together, this cause, interaction, and effect, they're all thoroughly not singular, not independent, and not permanent. They're just dependently arisen, which is to say lacking inherent existence. And that lack of inherent existence is talked about in Sutra Mahayana as emptiness. As instead of just the emptiness of self, we have the emptiness of all phenomena. Of other, the emptiness of other, the emptiness of self. So the emptiness of both subject, that's me, and object or objective, that's the other. So self and other are both completely empty. What's the other? I'm just zipping through a bunch of technical Buddhist stuff here, right? What's the other? Other can be categorized as space and time. What's the self? The self can be categorized as a sense of me, and also the belief in an uninterrupted series of moments of mind. And so when we use middle way Madhyamaka philosophy to really try to find an irreducible unit of time, an irreducible unit of space, or matter, an irreducible unit of mind, and the irreducible, ongoing, singular, independent, permanent me that is felt to be there, the result of middle way view, and when we apply it in practice, is we discover there are no such entities. There are no such things as irreducible units of time, space, mind, or the feeling or sense of me, the sense of self. These are all temporary, approximate conceptual designations that are just temporary mappings. They're placeholders. They're beliefs. Beliefs that don't actually have real reference in reality. It's just it's pointing towards something that's not there. It's never been there. There's never been an irreducible unit of time, space, mind, or a fixed sense of me. Like the fixed me isn't there. This ongoing sense of me might be there as a function of duality mind. But when we actually try to locate it with accuracy, like actually find the singular, independent, permanent moment of space, time, mind, or me, it's unfindable. And that unfindability of those aspects of self and other is called beyond conceptual designation. We have the lived ongoing experience of that unfindability, and what we get is we don't fixate on an irreducible unit of space, time, self, or other, and then we have a thorough lived experience of dependent arising, of emptiness. We see that our mind is naturally inherent, like lacks any inherent existence, that a sense of entity, world, other, experience, all kind of objects of the six sense doors, the ayatanas, like all of it is 100% thoroughly aggregated. It's all kind of endlessly open. No final foundation. No final meso, macro, micro, no smallest ground, no smallest particle, no biggest particle, no final edge. Like these are all the ways, like it's going beyond conceptual designation. Anything we can hold on to as if it's a thing, a singular, independent, permanent entity, that is unfindable. It's just a wish, a belief. And it once our mind, our awareness, stops making that mistake, that's called abiding in emptiness. And in terms of the third yana of Zen, that's called Bhumi Bodhisattva. All of a sudden we become an actual Bodhisattva. We like literally get on the levels of Bodhisattvahood. That's when we have an uninterrupted experience of emptiness, not a conceptual idea of emptiness, not theoretically being able to say something's without like singular, independent, permanent cause, condition, or result. But it's actually living that in body, with other, all the time, according to these absolute teachings that the Buddha introduced here explicitly in Sutra Mahayana as a relative and truth and absolute truth, the provisional truth and definitive truth. This kind of talk started arising in Sutra Mahayana. That absolutely, like the lived experience is to be in a way where we're not making that mistake of reifying anything outside, anything inside, anything in between. That's called emptiness, which Nagarjuna said on the relative level is called dependent origination. They're the same. They're synonyms, depending if we're looking through relative truth, dependent arising, absolute truth. It's called emptiness. And that, like either way of looking, we have to actually see the source of that looking. What is this awareness that's experiencing that? Instead of getting caught up in the way of looking, which is a framing or a view, we have to go beyond all views, or to go beyond all conceptual designation. And that means we actually taste emptiness. And by tasting it in an ongoing fashion, both first as an experience, a taste, first as an idea. We have the idea of emptiness, then we have the experience of it, a taste of emptiness, then we have the ongoing realization of emptiness, and when we have that uninterruptedly, that's the first Bhumi Bodhisattva of supreme joy. Finally, we realize we're never going to make the mistake of duality fixation again. We'll never unrealistically fuse our experience, lock it, freeze frame it, reify it, fixate it in an unrealistic way that causes suffering. Supreme joy. Finally, we're out. And then finally, we see that there was never a problem there. There was never such a thing as samsara. There was never such a thing as nirvana. These were all conceptually designated ideas that don't have actual reference in the real world. The real world meaning through the experience of ongoing emptiness realization. So this is called bodhicitta, heart mind of enlightenment, the union of wisdom and compassion, the natural union of relative and absolute truth, of emptiness and dependent arising, of compassion and wisdom. So then how do we do this as a practice path? Like, what is bodhicitta as a practice path in the Sutra Mahayana views? It's again subdivided into relative and absolute bodhicitta. The relative bodhicitta, this is called aspirational bodhicitta, and then actualizing or engaged or applied bodhicitta. So first we aspire to have an ongoing experience of love, compassion, and wisdom, which is bodhicitta. And then we actually put that into practice through the 6 paramita practices, this transcendental practices based on a wisdom or absolute bodhicitta. We have these 6 different ways of actually cultivating this ongoing lived experience of the union of wisdom and compassion, our bodhicitta. And so that is called the six paramita practices of transcendental, transcendental generosity, transcendental morality, transcendental patience, transcendental joyful effort, transcendental concentration, and transcendental wisdom, or transcendent. It's going beyond. It's this other shore wisdom component. By utilizing based on the ground as the wisdom paramita, the six paramita, then generosity becomes actually like leads us to the other shore. It's liberative. So we have liberative generosity, and then liberative morality, patience, joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. This is the path of the Bodhisattvas, the way of those courageous for the enlightenment of all beings. They're practicing the six paramitas. How? Based on the foundation of aspirational bodhicitta. What is aspirational bodhicitta? The four boundless, or the four immeasurables. Boundless love for all beings, boundless compassion for all beings, boundless sympathetic rejoicing for all beings, boundless equanimity, seeing all beings as being fundamentally equal without any kind of preference games. This is what we chanted in the very beginning of this practice, four boundless practices. May all beings have may all beings have happiness in the cause of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering in the cause of suffering. May all beings never be separated from supreme happiness, which is without suffering. May all beings remain in boundless equanimity, free from both attachment to close ones and rejection of others. These are the four immeasurable practices. Why is this foundational to the six paramitas? Because this is just a way we orient our mind, how we poise our mind. In these boundless love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, we do this is an inside job. Our mind is developing its capacity to have more inclusive, more expansive, more detailed, more granular, more direct experience of ongoing boundless love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And by doing this aspirationally, by using concepts to have better concepts, by using imagination to actually orient our ongoing lived embodied experience, that's bedrock of actually then in so-called real life with our body, speech, and mind, on all the layers, the outer, inner, secret, innermost, on the tangible, exoteric, empirical, on the interior, subjective, experiential. This six paramita practices are always based on this way of orienting, this framing, this world viewing, the views. We're like activating a view first aspirationally, which we can do at any moment, in any time, without having to do any specific kind of manifesting, thing. We don't have to say anything. We don't have to move our body. We can just aspire to be in a larger, more inclusive world framing with aspiration. And then once we stabilize that more, then we actually engage that with the six paramita practices. And these six paramita practices, like I mentioned before, this is how we're infusing all of everything we do with our body, our movement, our speech, like what we say, and our mind, how we believe, and how like our awareness is in an ongoing direct fashion. This is like living the 10 virtues in an ongoing fashion in this greater, more maha way, based on dependent origination in its most robust form of absolute truth, that is the emptiness of self and other, the two emptinesses that we went through real quickly. This is bodhicitta. This is the heart practice of the Mahayana. It's the heart practice of all Buddhism, but it's explicitly mentioned here. And then we can see in the second turning teachings of the Buddha, where the Buddha talks, like directly points out in this essential text, the Heart Sutra, which is said to bring together all the 100,000 or so like paramita, like prajna paramita, wisdom paramita teachings. It condensed into the Heart Sutra. Then the Buddha basically goes through a list of all the first turning teachings the Buddha gave and says this was only an approximate truth. It only works when we believe in a sense of self, and that sense of self experiencing suffering. And there's a path to the cessation of suffering. Then we achieve the cessation of suffering. Those were all temporary designations that were just approximately true, temporarily true. And the Heart Sutra goes through that laundry list of all those first turning teachings and shows how they were only approximate. The direct experience of emptiness is beyond all conceptual designation. That's called absolute bodhicitta. This absolute bodhicitta has two aspects, or two ways it can be approached. The first is like this svatantrika madhyamaka middle way, and the second is prasangika madhyamaka middle way. The svatantrika basically uses concepts as stepping stones It uses duality fabrications in order to go beyond the limits of any conceptual designation. Madhyamaka, middle way, like on the Prasangika approach, is like a via negativa, apophatic approach, where we're just pointing out the limitations of every approach, of every concept, of every representational system, of every worldview, of every framing. We're showing how, even though it might include a lot of goodness, truth, and beauty, it's still approximate or limited because it's based on a sense of a subject interacting with an object. And that kind of a modeling system, a representational modeling system of subject-object duality or duality consciousness, that always includes an inherent flaw or mistake. So if you look closely enough, there's always a self-contradiction. So in logic, that's called, you can find the reductio ad absurdum, that as a closed system, any set of concepts is going to have some kind of a self-contradictory stance, or at the very least, it's going to rely on certain assumptions that it itself can't prove. So here's this Gödel theorem application. Like a system cannot know, it's impossible for a system to be simultaneously self-consistent and complete. So it's either internally consistent but relying on assumptions it can't prove, or it's complete, it's as a system, like it's internally consistent as a system, but it relies on assumptions it can't prove. That's the first. Or it's complete, meaning like it extends as like this ongoing interdependent system, but that means it actually is gonna like have internested views or internested systems or sets of assumptions. And these internested sets of assumptions will be contradictory depending on what set you're holding. So basically, if you have emptiness, you're basically, if you believe in one view, it relies on the assumptions of its foundational or subviews, but then it extends beyond the logic of the patterned logic of those views. And so you have like, if you lock into the subview, it seems that the larger view is contradictory to it. And so that would be internally inconsistent, but it's because it includes a larger frame, so it's not closed. It's not a closed set. It's an interactive set of internested systems that's independent. So system-wise, it's independent, and thus it can be consistent between systems. So anyway, that's like a little technical tangent on kind of Gödel theorems, like a system cannot be both internally consistent and complete. And in Buddhism, that's just called emptiness or dependent arising. So that's bodhicitta if we look at it from a scriptural depiction, you know? Dependent arising or emptiness, that ongoing relationality, 100% relational, that means it's both complete and consistent, and that lived experience of like interdependence is the union of absolute and relative bodhicitta. Relatively, we have the aspiring for boundless. In application, as the practice of the six paramitas, going beyond all conceptual designation as the lived experience of abiding in emptiness, that would be first Bhumi Bodhisattva realization. This is all bodhicitta. All different ways to talk about love, compassion, and wisdom, both on the study side, how we orient, and on the practice side, how we actually bring that about as a lived experience that reduces the suffering of self and the suffering of others, both immediately and long-lastingly. This is all core Sutra Mahayana, Zen, kind of third yana view structure, where bodhicitta is explicitly brought to the fore. And so then they say this Heart Sutra teaching, this quintessential bodhicitta text that distills all these Prajnaparamita teachings in the second turning, it naturally extends itself into the third turning teachings. Whereas in the second turning, it's called Rang Tong, empty of self, empty of entity or self-designated fixation. So it's empty of that. That's this second turning, or emptiness or dependent arising teaching. And then that naturally includes an implicit view. It's called the hidden Prajnaparamita teachings, the hidden meaning of the Heart Sutra, and that expands into the third turning teaching. It's the Heart Sutra says, you know, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is none other than emptiness. Emptiness is none other than form. This idea of like there being emptiness is explicitly taught in the Heart Sutra as being emptiness always arises as form. There's always expression. There's always relational extension. There's always a relative aspect. And that relative aspect we talk about here in the third turning as Buddha nature. That's what the Buddha taught in the Shen Tong teachings. Empty of other. And what is the other in this third turning teaching? This is still Sutra Mahayana. In this third turning teaching, this Shentong, empty of other, it's empty of things that are adventitious or just temporary mistakes. So once we remove these like fabricated, mistaken perceptions, mistaken ways of being, what are we left with? We're not just left with a black hole blank emptiness or nihilism. If we hold on to that, it becomes this very wrong view of nihilism. What we're left with is these amazingly infinite, boundless qualities of love, compassion, and wisdom. Buddha nature, or Bodhichitta, the heart mind of enlightenment. And so as an experience, this great Venerable Khenpo Tsewang Dongyal Rinpoche, he said, philosophically, the second turning is the highest philosophy because it goes beyond all conceptual designation and it shows how to do that, how to discover the unfindability of any fixed entity. And that's philosophically the highest view. But then experientially, in practice, in lived experience, Shentong is the highest view, empty of other, because when we're not fixating, what is it like? We have all this love comes pouring through. All this compassion comes pouring through. All these abilities come pouring through. The 10 powers and the 4 fearlessnesses. These like hypercognitive or metacognitive, these supramundane kind of capacities to see further, hear clearer, like think more consistently, have, perfect recall. Like all these teachings start coming online because all these capacities, these cities, or these natural qualities are unblocked by the temporary holding patterns. Like when we're abiding in emptiness on bodhisattva levels, all of a sudden that emptiness is like kind of fizzling away or dissolving, like removing, evaporating these like temporary mistaken holding patterns. And as we like release more, that's when we're going to the bodhisattva bhumis or layered levels. And that all these natural capacities or cities start to come on. They start to turn on. They were just previously blocked. And now the fixation is being removed. Fixation, these are called obscurations. First the emotional obscurations, then the cognitive obscurations, the beliefs, and then the subtle stains. These like super subtle beliefs, these super subtle holding patterns. That's what we're moving through the process of going through the bodhisattva bhumi levels. And this is an interior experience of being able to directly abide in emptiness and removing like how much we can actually be with living reality, living experience, and to let all these natural capacities of Buddha nature, of bodhicitta, start extending, both for self and other. For myself, in how many extending more lives back, more probable lives into the future, with more beings around me, and more exacting, very skillful, finessed, elegant ways of interacting and bringing about the mutual uplift of being, of creating these nutritious, very honed, exact, detailed sets of skillful conditions that help beings naturally have their own Buddha nature turn on, its own prajna turn on. It becomes an autopoetic system, or a sympathetically poetic system, where the prajna of oneself or others is facilitated by this perfectly arranged array of conditions, where its own intelligence, this root cause, Buddha nature, shines brighter on its own. It's self-illuminating. This is all Sutra Mahayana teachings here, okay? So then the great master Jamgong Minpam Rinpoche, he said the union of the second and third turning is the definitive teaching of the Buddha. What's the union of second and third turning? The union of the emptiness, dependent arising teachings, philosophically, in union with the third turning, Shentong, empty of other natural Buddha nature qualities. So we have, without fixating on any conceptual designation, we have the ongoing lived experience of these natural capacities of Buddha nature, and that union of removing conceptual designation and living the embodied bodhicitta more and more fully, that is the definitive teaching of the Buddha. This is called bodhicitta, union of relative and absolute bodhicitta. So now based on this, the Sutra Mahayana third yana, then all of a sudden it expands even more maha, more greater, more inclusive, more comprehensive. Buddha nature expresses even more vividly, more inclusively, more naturally as the tantras. So based on the sutras, we have the tantras naturally emerge, naturally arising, just spontaneously, because like the view gets so big and profound, and like it starts to kind of open up so richly, like it's being unblocked, and naturally it includes Tantra. So this is called the pure expression of Buddha nature. Like, what does that mean? Instead of like having Buddha nature funnel through impure body, impure speech, and impure mind, it funnels through or expresses as pure body, pure speech, and pure mind. That's where we get the tantras. These are yanas, or vehicles 4 through 9. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Both beginning with the outer tantras, then the inner tantras. This is all just bodhicitta teachings. So now we have this heart of bodhicitta, the union of the second and third turnings, of emptiness and Buddha nature teachings, of the philosophy and the lived experience of, the middle way view, middle way Yamaka. So we have, based on that as the heart, this bodhicitta heart, we have Tantra arises the path of the union of skillful means and wisdom. We have such a visceral experience of wanting all beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Well, how can I do that now? Like as fast as possible, using whatever's available to use that. It could be Buddhist or non-Buddhist. It could be body-based or idea-based. It could be anything that's going to be helpful, that will help, meaning skillfully attuned to, align with others, to be the exact supportive conditions for their own Buddha nature to turn on autopoetically and just naturally flow better. Naturally have Buddha nature shine out more brightly, more uninterrupted fashion. That's called the path of skillful means and wisdom in union. This is Vajrayana, or Tibetan Buddhism, which was taught by the Buddha in India. It was taught by the Buddha before this world system. This is like an ongoing, this is all, now we're in Tantra Mahayana, or the Tantra view, which is what's just often kind of like, lazily called like Tibetan Buddhism in one way, but it's Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. It's like this, Buddha taught it in India. It was like, went to Tibet in the 8th century or thereabouts, and then the culture of Tibet, under the kind of wisdom, compassion activities of Guru Rinpoche, King Tritsen Detsen, and Shantarakshita, established this view of Vajrayana, the indestructible vehicle, in Tibet as a culture, and the culture itself fully resourced by the kingdom, according to Dharma King Tritsen Detsen and these other two, Guru Rinpoche and Shantarakshita. Then this culture became from the 8th until like the 1959, like this ongoing kind of beautiful, like amazing culture of the indestructible vehicle of Vajrayana teachings of the Buddha. And these are the teachings of pure body, pure speech, pure mind, which are called deity, mantra, and dharmakaya. So this is pure body, pure speech, pure mind. This is Buddha nature, or the bodhicitta, arising purely as deity, as mantra, as dharmakaya awareness. So this is just how, this is a compassion. This is even the great Chandrakirti is so amazing. He said, I pay homage to compassion. That's the source of all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, all the Arhats is compassion. I pay homage to compassion. So first we'll, and more sutra approach, we have compassion for the suffering being. Then we have compassion for them not seeing the cause of the suffering. Then we have compassion just as the natural response of like emptiness naturally wants to include more. It's called interdependence. It includes more compassionately, naturally extends its sphere of inclusion. And then that arises purely as deity, mantra, and dharmakaya. Where pure body is, everything is bodhicitta. All forms are bodhicitta. All sounds, or the semi-form, is bodhicitta. All movements of mind, all mind and its expressions are bodhicitta. This is called pure body, pure speech, pure mind. Everything is deity, mantra, and dharmakaya, or everything outwardly is bodhicitta in form, semi-form, and formless awareness. So we have this whole layered system of body, speech, and mind, or form, semi-form, and formlessness. They're all nature of Buddha nature, bodhicitta, and now they're expressing themselves purely. Not through the two obscurations of emotional obscuration and cognitive obscuration, but just unfiltered through any duality misconceptions. That means purely. So we've gone beyond conceptual designation. Now we're in Buddha nature abiding. And now that abiding is like less and less blocked through the Bodhisattva bhumis. And then the skillful mean practices to bring about like the mutual benefit, omni-win uplift of all beings to be free of suffering and cause of suffering. By seeing there was never suffering, there was never a prison we were trapped in. Freedom is unavoidable because we were never trapped. And by actually having sets of techniques using body, speech, and mind to bring that about vigorously, quickly, swiftly, skillfully, flexibly. That's called Tibetan Buddhism, or Tantra Mahayana, yanas 4 through 9. Yana 4, 5, 6, that's called outer tantras. In the outer tantras, we're basically still having the view that I have this Buddha nature, but it's covered up by all these stained kind of rags or misconception. And by interacting with such a being as an enlightened being, that in orienting towards them with my body and speech properly, eventually I receive the blessings of that enlightened being, and then my Buddha nature is fully revealed to myself. These are like basic foundational frames of outer tantras. Like where we see the deity as being like a kind of a master and I'm a kind of a servant. They're higher and I'm lower. We both have Buddha nature, but they've realized it fully. I'm still covered in all these kind of stained misconceptions. And by aligning with them, by orienting my body through kind of ascetic and purity practices, and my speech, again, through like ascetic and purity practices, and my mind, then by mingling with the blessings of that deity or that Buddha, then all of a sudden I become just like that Buddha, meaning I fully recognize the quality of my Buddha nature and their Buddha nature. This is like foundational framings of the outer tantras. Then the inner tantras is even more maha, more greater, more comprehensive, more direct, detailed, and inclusive of the true nature of bodhicitta, of Buddha nature. And that is to say, there's no longer a deity seen as higher and myself as lower. It sees everything as pure body, speech, and mind. Everything is pure body, pure speech, pure mind, or deity, mantra, and dharmakaya. I'm already deity. Everything, all my semi-form movement of energy, prana, chi, that's all pure semi-form. That energy, that's mantra. All movements of bodhicitta in semi-form. And then mind, all my mind and its definite expressing capacities or its display of ideas, of emotions, of memories, of any kind of perceptions, conceptions, precepts, concepts, all of it is just display of Buddha nature, bodhicitta. So this is all pure body, pure speech, and pure mind. And so here, like in inner tantras, is Maha Yoga, Anu Yoga, Atha Yoga, are the 7th, 8th, and 9th yana vehicles. Then first, the Maha Yoga emphasizes that everything I'm in the world and the beings around me are deity. And then Anu Yoga goes deeper, more direct to the nature. Everything within me, there's like universes of deities and mantra and dharmakaya, like all the pure activities of the deities are in my body. And then Atha Yoga says everything is pure body, pure speech, pure mind. Inside is enlightened universes of deities doing enlightened activities. Outside is enlightened deities doing enlightened activities with body, speech, and mind. And it also sees the mistaken nightmarish perceptions of dualistic fixation in all the ways. But it sees through the duality. It sees through the temporary approximate mistaken perception. So it's all always only been Buddha nature. Bodhicitta. It's all always been pure. And now it's like seeing that outer, inner, innermost, outer, inner, secret, innermost, all the layers, all the avenues, all the cosmic address corners of all of reality has always only ever been pure body, pure speech, and pure mind. This is Atha Yoga Dzogchen Mahasandhi view. And actual, like this is just like saying, mapping, talking about it, like the scriptural side. Then there's the direct lived experience where you're actually abiding, like you're spending time, you're in kind of contact with a lived kind of master or like totally accomplished knowledge holder, awareness holder, who's like accomplished these Dzogchen teachings or this highest, unexcelled inner tantra teachings, whichever kind of lineage framing, whichever kind of Vajrayana school like holds these. There's different ways. They all go back to the Buddha. They're like non-contradictory. And then you're with that being, and like by aligning with that such a being, like as a lived teacher, like your guru or your teacher, then they're basically using this path of skillful means to help you see that everything is pure body, pure speech, and pure mind. And we do that first with a single being, like a teacher, or like a few teachers, depending on how we can have more than one root teacher, depends on the capacity of the student, or kind of also the phase of the student, all that. But then working with a single person, we're trying to see that everything they do, say, and their movement of mind, how they express, is all pure body, pure speech, pure mind. We stabilize that more and more with like one who's said to be a scholar practitioner, a master of scripture and realization of all the yana vehicle levels of Buddhism. And then by kind of maintaining more of a stable ongoing experience of these three vajras, the body, speech, and mind, pure body, pure speech, pure mind. But then we expand that to see, this the root teacher and their immediate retinue, in their home, in their activities, And like more and more, we're including more pure body, more pure speech, more pure mind. It's not, we're changing it. We're not transforming anything. We're just, our own mind, our own bodhicitta heart mind is opening to see more clearly, more fully, more comprehensively, that everything is pure body, pure speech, and pure mind, that everything's a guru, everything's a teacher, outer guru, inner guru, secret guru, innermost guru. Maha Yoga, outer deity, everything's deity. The inner and secret, Anu Yoga, like all of the movements, like more subtle movements, are all deity, mantra, dharmakaya. And innermost, everything has always been pure body, pure speech, pure mind. There's a variety, infinite variety of waves. They're all equally wet. There's an infinite variety of expressions, both mistaken ones of samsara, both the accurate ones of nirvana, and then the ones that go beyond all the different conceptual designations and see Buddha nature, bodhicitta, shining fully, uninterruptedly, without any kind of like a mistaken perception. It's pure body, pure speech, pure mind. It's always been only this way. And so here we're in non-dual teachings of Hatha Yoga or Dzogchen, where it doesn't rely on any conceptual designation at all, in the sense of there's no framing, there's no mistaken holding pattern. We're just seeing the deities outside, the deities inside, the deities everywhere. All sound of all kinds are pure bodies. It's all mantra. Everything has always only been Dharmakaya. It's not using any conceptual designation system of any kind, of any level, granularity of habit. Like any kind of conceptual designation, it's just based on wisdom, awareness, or Rigpa. That Rigpa in union with space, like boundless vast space and all the different explorers, inhabitants, expressions that populate that space. So it's total freedom, total fullness, equally. It's all equally just deity, mantra, and Dharmakaya. And that arises in an infinite variety of ways. And those infinite variety of ways, then that means that depends, like that determines our path. Which patterns am I more available to align with that help me see that it's all patterned, displayed reality of enlightened mind, of enlightened body, and enlightened speech? Like what habits are more actively available? What duality patterns are more ripely available in my mind to use that duality skillfully, to go beyond and remove the duality entirely, to just be abiding in wisdom awareness that sees this union of pure relative, that's called great purity, and pure absolute, it's called great equality. So that's the highest view of Hatha Yoga, the union of great purity and great equality. Everything is pure body, pure speech, and mind, equally, without exception, always. So that's called Bodhicitta. That's why Bodhicitta is said to be a synonym of Dzogchen. Bodhicitta is just the naturalness of one's mind. It's a naturalness of one's body. It's a naturalness of one's speech. This is the highest view. It's all only ever been bodhicitta. That's why from this view of Hatha Yoga, in Nyingma school, they talk about the whole path is like ground, path, and result. The ground is bodhicitta. The path is the view of bodhicitta, meditation of bodhicitta, and the conduct or behavior of bodhicitta. And the result is just like fully manifested, uninterrupted, always ongoing experience, lived experience of bodhicitta, which is what was always there. It was always the ground. But by abiding in the view of bodhicitta, union of relative and absolute bodhicitta, and then stabilizing that as a meditation and integrating that as like a lived kind of ongoing conduct or experience of how we are in our life with others, this view, meditation, and conduct, we actualize that as a result of becoming a Buddha, a fully awakened one, who sees the natural, already, always present union of relative and absolute bodhicitta, of great purity and great equality, of just this was always how it was. It was always beyond dualistic fixation. These temporary ways of holding are now entirely removed. Our natural Buddha nature qualities are always ongoingly expressive in more and more inclusive, functional, skillful, elegant ways that aren't leaving out any other habit ways that other beings might hold and have nightmares or have like delicious, luxurious dreams. It includes all the language systems, all the representational models, all the conceptual mistakes and designations, but it doesn't believe in any of them in a fixated way. It sees the pure nature of them, and it sees how the mistake can be made. It takes a mature adult view, and it sees how all the little kids can believe all the variety of different ways of, being in the world. It includes the spicy food and the boring, kind of like bitter food. It includes all the different varieties of types of ways of dancing, of languaging, all the layers of stages of levels, all the lines of multiple intelligence, all the corners of like subject, object, intersubjective, interobjective. It includes all the different, shadow elements that are still unconscious and unknown to ourselves, even these filter systems that are operating that we don't yet see, but they're like they're like system, like they're like the literal like system code that we're like moving through. Bodhicitta, at this view, includes all of it. It doesn't throw anything out. Everything is a natural expression of mind. Union of relative and absolute bodhicitta. This is how it's all bodhicitta in a non-reductionist, non-fundamentalist way. Bodhicitta is always the answer. It's called universal panacea. The great Guru Rinpoche said, without bodhicitta, the root of Dharma is rotten. And great Palden Rinpoche said, if you need one practice to achieve complete enlightenment, that'll be enough. Without that one practice, you won't ever get enlightenment. It's impossible. And that one thing is bodhicitta. The one thing required for enlightenment, regardless of whether you're Buddhist or not Buddhist. So this is the nature of reality. Bodhicitta, heart mind of enlightenment. It goes beyond any belief system, any dogmatic system, any doctrinal system that's established in Sutra Mahayana, goes beyond all conceptual designation, and it naturally expresses itself as immeasurable, inexhaustible, infinite, boundless, inconceivable love, compassion, and wisdom. This is just natural bodhicitta, heart mind of enlightenment. This is the one thing that always only makes a situation better. It always is only helpful. Bodhicitta answers every question. Bodhicitta flexibly free flows into the exact dynamics of a living context. It actually engages the context and allows the concept, the context, the body, the speech, the mind, the beings, their tragedies, their histories, their traumas, their talents. It allows the conditions, the context, to shape the features of what is helpful and skillful in that context. That's how it's not fundamentalist. Bodhicitta lets the system of cause, condition, and effect, it lets it shape the container of the game, of the language, of the world. And then it basically like supplements or like nutritively like supports that system and whatever's available to be more healthy, more well-rounded, more directly expressive of the natural goodness and intelligence of the system. And then it lets go. Because it was only ever illusory. It was only ever moving. It was always just a moving target, dynamic, illusion, dewdrop, dream, hallucination, city of Gandharva. It's always only ever been interdependent or impermanent. So in this way, we can see how like foundational Theravada Buddhism, Sutra Mahayana Buddhism, Tantra Mahayana Buddhism, and Dzogchen, they're all just bodhicitta. It's different ways to talk about bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is what's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, it's good in the end. Bodhicitta is refuge in bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the shamatha and vipassana, or concentration and insight. Bodhicitta is why we dedicate the merit and why we aspire to be even more beneficial for all beings everywhere. This has all only ever been bodhicitta. So here, trying to like give you some degree of like a study and practice kind of elements, some key Buddhist elements of how bodhicitta really is all the answer to all our questions. And like in the mix of information overload and 21st century, like too much of everything, fast, interacting, cross-pollinating, moving, hyper complex, with hyper object. It's all so big and nuanced and complex now. Bodhicitta is going to be the bird's eye view. Bodhicitta is going to be the granular nugget insight. Bodhicitta is going to be the layered meso, medium scale, intermediate way of unpacking. And it's going to fine-tune itself according to the causes and conditions of the lived ongoing reality. We can use bodhicitta to aspire. We can use bodhicitta to act. We can use bodhicitta to manifest as an infinite variety of deities, of Buddhas. Bodhicitta is all the ways that mantra function. Bodhicitta is the 5 wisdoms and its 25 combinations. Bodhicitta is everything. Ground, path, fruition, meditation, view, conduct. It's all bodhicitta. So I hope it's helpful. And yeah, bodhicitta. Activate bodhicitta. We dedicate the merit for all beings. May they be free of all suffering and the causes of suffering. May they abide in emptiness right now. May they directly experience their Buddha nature. May the fullness of the Buddha nature glow brightly without any limit or any hindrance, any restriction. And may the natural, three kaya union of pure body, pure speech, and pure mind, may this natural union of great purity and great equality like instantly arise this very instant. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. Precious Bodhichitta, and those without it, may it be generated. And those who have it, may it never diminish, but always continue increasing. Deity, mantra, and dharmakaya are the nature of appearance, sound, and awareness, the pervasive kaya and wisdom display of the Buddhas. May practitioners of the profound and secret great perfection remain inseparable from the innermost, one-taste awareness of wisdom mind. Love ya. Thanks, friends.